Race Against Death. Before we start reading this narrative nonfiction article, we're going to take a second to examine the photos that we see here on the first couple of pages, along with the title of the text, which is called The Race Against Death, and this short excerpt, and we're going to use those things to make a prediction for what we think this story might be about. It says, the children of Nome, Alaska have been infected with a deadly disease. The cure is hundreds of miles away, across a frozen wilderness. Their only hope for survival? Dogs. Based on this excerpt, as long as the title and the pictures that you see here on the front cover, please make a prediction now for what you think this story might be about. Before we jump in and begin reading this story today, I do want to let you know that you are expected to follow along with me. There are going to be some questions that are built in throughout our video today. And the expectation is that you are able to complete this with an 80% or higher on those questions. At the end, if we have not reached that 80%, I am going to reset the video and ask you to watch it again. And I do want to remind you that seminar class is for a grade, so this will be going in Infinite Campus. So please make sure you are paying attention and following along with me. From his window, Dr. Curtis Welch watched as the Almeida, the last ship of the fall season of 1924, pulled away from the dock in Nome, Alaska. In a few weeks, Nome would be almost completely cut off from the rest of the world by the winter weather. Until spring, the town's only link with the rest of Alaska would be one frozen, windswept dog sled trail. The Almeida had brought Dr. Welch his winter supplies: cotton balls, ether, tongue depressors, thermometers, and various medicines. But one item he'd ordered was missing: fresh diphtheria, antitoxin. The hospital's current supply had expired and would not work. Diphtheria is a bacterial infection of the nose and throat. It can cause breathing problems, heart problems, paralysis, and even death. Today, most Americans are vaccinated against diphtheria as children, but this was not the case in 1924. The diphtheria vaccine was still new, and most Americans had not received it. Instead, people were treated with an antitoxin after they got sick. Dr. Welch had been in Nome for 18 years, and in that time, he had never seen a confirmed case of diphtheria. But the disease strikes suddenly and is highly contagious. Without the antitoxin, Nome's people would be helpless in an outbreak. Dr. Welch prayed diphtheria would stay away for one more winter. Sadly, the people of Nome would not be that lucky. A deadly outbreak. Soon after the Almeida had steamed off, a family with 4 children arrived in town. The youngest was ill. Dr. Welch guessed the child had a mild infection. But by morning, the child was dead. Within weeks, 3 more children had died. Then, on January 20th, 1925, Dr. Welch checked in on a 3-year-old boy named Billy Barnett. Billy had been admitted to the hospital 2 weeks earlier with a sore throat and fever, and now the boy had developed a thick gray membrane in his throat. It was a layer of dead tissue that could mean only one thing: diphtheria. The name diphtheria comes from the Greek word for leather to describe the thick membrane. In a matter of days, the membrane would block Billy's windpipe and kill him. Nome's outlook was not good. Diphtheria can move from one warm body to the next through a single touch or a sneeze, and at the time, nearly 200,000 people were sickened by diphtheria every year. The disease was a major cause of death among kids. To treat people, Dr. Welch needed 1 million units of fresh antitoxin, and he needed it right away. By January 25th, a supply had been located in Anchorage, a city 500 miles from Nome. It was not enough for the whole town, but Dr. Welch hoped it would be enough to keep the disease from spreading. But how to get the medicine to Nome? In 1925, there were no jet planes or ice-cutting ships. There were no rugged trucks or snowmobiles. The Bering Sea, which surrounded the peninsula on which Nome is located, was already partly frozen, rendering it impassable to ships. The closest major railroad was 674 miles away in the town of Neenah. That's the same distance between Los Angeles and California and Salt Lake City, Utah. Nome's leaders made a plan. They would have the medicine sent by train from Anchorage to Neenah. Then it would be carried to Nome across hundreds of miles of frozen wilderness by dog sled. Super mushers. Town leaders put out a call for the fastest teams of dogs and the most experienced mushers, as dog sled drivers are called. The plan was for a relay. One musher would pick up the medicine at the railroad station in Ninia. Others would wait with their dog teams in villages along the trail. Each musher would travel a part of the trail and pass the medicine to the next musher until it reached the trail's midpoint, the village of Nulato. Meanwhile, a highly skilled musher named Leonard Seppala would set out from Nome and travel the 300 miles to Nulato. There he would pick up the medicine and head back to Nome. The trip from Ninia to Nome usually took 25 days or more. The super mushers would have to make the trip in far less time. It was a risky plan for both mushers and dogs, and there was no guarantee the medicine would survive the freezing journey. But hundreds of lives were at stake, and there was no other choice. It was to be a race against death. The journey began in Nome on January 27th. Seppala set out for Nulato. He would have to travel one of Alaska's most dangerous trails and take a shortcut across the frozen Norton Sound. This shortcut would be littered with sharp pieces of ice that could slice open a dog's paw. The ice would break up with little warning, dropping man and dogs into the icy water. Still, Seppala was the fastest musher in Alaska. If anyone could make it, he could. A single push. As Seppala raced east, Wild Bill Shannon and his team of 9 dogs were at the other end of the trail. In Ninia, Shannon met the train carrying the medicine. The crate of medicine weighed 20 pounds. It contained glass vials of amber-colored serum, packed in a padded container and wrapped in fur and canvas. Shannon put the crate on his sled and set off for the village of Tulvana, where another musher was waiting. Normally, the 52-mile trip over frozen terrain took 2 days. Shannon was told to make the trip in one push, traveling through the night. As a rule, dog sled drivers didn't travel in temperatures lower than 40 degrees below zero. That night, it was 50 below. For the human body, such cold temperatures are dangerous. It's hard to breathe. Frostbite causes flesh to die. If hypothermia sets in, it becomes hard to move. The body grows sleepy and death may follow. In spite of the risks, Shannon pushed on. He paused for only a few hours near the end to rest his dogs and warm his frozen body. 3 of his dogs were too tired to continue. Shannon left them to warm up as the trail outpost. He traveled the final 4 hours with only 6 dogs. When he reached Tulvana, his face was black with frostbite. Men rushed out from the roadhouse. They put the medicine on another sled and helped Shannon into the warmth. The first part of the relay was done, but there were still hundreds of miles to cover, and a blizzard was headed for western Alaska. Meanwhile, things in Nome were getting worse. The situation is bad, Nome's mayor said in a telegram to leaders in Washington, D.C. The number of diphtheria cases increases hourly. By now, the whole country knew of Nome's plight. Newspapers and radio stations reported the news, and people across America prayed that the medicine would reach Nome before it was too late. The final musher. At first, the mushers were lucky. Seppala made it over the Norton Sound without mishap, and the medicine reached Nulato earlier than expected because Nome's leaders had added more mushers to the relay. There were now 20 mushers involved in the race to save Nome. One of the mushers set off to meet Seppala and reached him outside Nulato. Seppala strapped the medicine to his sled and turned around to head back across the Norton Sound. 78 miles from Nome, in the village of Golovin, he handed the cargo to another musher, Charlie Olson. Olson traveled 25 miles to the village of Bluff. There, the crate was loaded onto the sled of the final musher, Gunnar Kaysen. At this point, the life-saving cargo was only about 50 miles east of Nome, but the blizzard had closed in. There were strong winds, blinding snow, and a wind chill of 70 degrees below zero. 5 miles in, a huge snowdrift blocked Kaysen's path. He had to leave the trail and go around the drift. He hoped his league dog, Balto, would be able to find the trail again. The minutes crawled by. Balto sniffed through several feet of snow, trying to pick up the scent of the trail. Kaysen's heart raced. His body ached with cold. If Balto failed, it would mean disaster for Nome and for Kaysen and his dogs too. Suddenly, Balto lifted his head and broke into a run. The team was back on track, but the danger was not over. For the next 20 miles, wind beat at Kaysen. The sled kept careening off the trail, dragging the dogs with it. The musher was losing strength. Finally, at 5:30 a.m. on February 2nd, Kaysen and his team pulled onto Front Street in Nome. Kaysen got off the sled. He collapsed near Balto, muttering, "Fine dog." Dr. Welch had the medicine, and by the next day it was clear that the patients would recover. The news spread, and soon the whole country knew about the victory of the men and the dogs over the worst that nature could throw at them. The mushers had made the trip in just 5 days. The dogs became heroes around the country. Kaysen and Seppala did too. Nome had been saved.